So your first step is to start with an image. You're going to go into your camera roll where you've saved those images and put in the base layer. I'm choosing the lemons. Then you're going to want to add another layer. When you add another layer, add an image, photos, and select the second image. At that time, it will let you transform the image to make it larger, narrower, wider, and it'll allow you to turn it. Get it to the approximate position and size that you need, then click Done. At that point, we need to take out the background behind the kiwis. We only want the green part of the kiwi. So you're going to use the selection tool to select just that area while on that layer. Then click Invert at the bottom and Erase. This will narrow it down. Then you can deselect. You'll want to hide the lemons at this time. Tap on that layer and click the eyeball. Then click back on your other layer with your kiwi. Now we want to get closer to the edges that we want to keep. And you'll do that with the eraser. But you don't want a hard edge. There are no hard edges on a piece of fruit. They all sort of fade and slowly blend into one another. So I use the eraser tool in such a way that it has a faded edge. If you're using an Apple Pencil, you can also choose to use the pressure point to decide how much you're taking off and leaving behind. As you work around those edges, you can get the bulk of it off pretty quickly. But you'll want to start zooming in when you work on the really close edges and make sure that it's fading out just as you would like. While you're working on this, you'll want to have the edges slightly less smooth. And if pressure option's available, you can turn that on at this time under your eraser tool settings. You'll really want to zoom in and make sure you're not leaving any hard lines behind. Once you have the hard lines erased and it's fairly faded, zoom back out and turn back on the underneath layer. Be sure to click back onto your kiwi layer to move it using the select tool at the top. It's that little arrow. It'll move it over. You'll notice it's not quite the right fit, so I'm going to have to go back and transform it and make it a little larger. The other option I have is I can erase the parts that are too big using that eraser tool. I select a larger eraser and I go back through and start erasing. You can also adjust the angle if you want to a little bit more. Enlarge it and place it on top. When I think I have it mostly the way I want, I turn off that layer and turn it back on to make sure there's no glaring mistakes someplace. I have noticed it's still a little sharp on this side, so I'm going to go back in and fade that and blend it out just a little bit more with my eraser tool. Now, there's a little section down near the bottom where I didn't have it quite big enough. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to select the color that I want to use to fill in that space. I can use the eyedropper tool and click on a color to fill that in a little bit. I'm going to zoom out to make sure it sort of matches. But then I know, you can see there's texture in the rest of it that's a little blurry and out of focus. I'm going to have to add that texture back in. So I'm going to use that eyedropper tool to capture that darker green color that's in there and add in some of those green specks near that outer edge. When I do those specks, I want to make sure that I have a smaller point size on my brush and that it's not too big and creates that fuzzy outline like we have now. I don't want these to be perfectly sharp, so we're gonna have a few options using the blur tool within the layer itself. So I'm creating this on a new layer that I'm able to change as I work through it. I'm gonna add in some of those speckledy spots, and they're that similar dark color. When I use a blur tool, it's going to make those dots even lighter because it's blending it and blurring it with the background. If I zoom out, they still look a little too sharp. So I'm going to go back over to my layers and click on my layer options and go all the way down. And then I'm going to pick, there we go, the Gaussian blur. And it's going to give me options as to how much I want to blur. I'm going to back that down just a little bit. If I get it too blurry, it's just going to look out of focus. If I zoom back out, it looks pretty good. So at this time, to save my project, in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to do a quick export. Save the image, and it's going to go to your camera roll where you can export it for the project.